The touch of his fingers on Harper's wet skin was fire and ice all at once. Trapped in the darkness of a luxurious bathroom, not knowing who was who, all that remained was their ragged breathing, the hot steam from the shower, and the dangerous closeness of two bodies that had found each other by chance. Every accidental brush was an electric shock, every whisper in the dark an unspoken promise. But when the lights came on and she saw his face, her heart stopped. That man wasn't just a stranger. He was impossible. The California sun was beginning to set over the Azure Bay Resort, painting the sky orange and pink as Pacific waves gently crashed against the rocks below. The air had that distinctive smell of sea salt mixed with jasmine from the newly planted gardens. Harper Lane adjusted the camera strap on her shoulder, feeling the familiar weight of the equipment as her eyes swept over every architectural detail of the still empty resort. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, photographing one of the most luxurious developments on the West Coast before its official opening. She climbed the spiral staircase leading to the rooftop, her sneakers making a muffled sound against the polished marble. Up there, the view was breathtaking. The infinity pool reflected the sky like a perfect mirror, and beyond it, the ocean stretched as far as the eye could see. Harper smiled, already imagining the perfect angle if she could capture the sunset reflected in the water with the mountains in the background. She moved quickly, too focused on finding the ideal composition. Her heart was racing with the creative excitement she always felt when she found that magic moment when light, shadow, and emotion aligned perfectly. She approached the edge of the empty pool, leaning forward to adjust the lens focus. And then it happened. Her foot slipped on the marble, still wet from recent cleaning. The world turned upside down in an instant. Harper felt her stomach drop as her body fell. The scream caught in her throat, her arms flailing uselessly in the air. The camera flew from her hands. The impact with the shallow pool's icy water hit her like a punch, knocking all the air from her lungs. When she managed to get her bearings, she was on her knees in water that barely covered her waist, drenched, shaking from cold and shock. Her dark hair stuck to her face, her eyes burning with chlorine, her heart pounding in her chest. Humiliation burned her cheeks. What professional photographer falls into an empty pool? "Are you okay?" The voice came from somewhere above her, deep, smooth as velvet, filled with genuine concern. Harper looked up, blinking to clear the water, and saw a silhouette approaching quickly. A tall man with broad shoulders, wearing only black swim trunks, drops of water running down his defined torso. He had been swimming in the Olympic lanes next door, and was now descending the steps of the empty pool toward her with agile, determined movements. When he knelt beside her, Harper finally managed to focus on his face. Intense gray-blue eyes watched her with a mixture of relief and something else, something that made her heart skip a completely different beat. His face was strong, masculine, with a jawline marked by stubble and lips that now curved into an expression of sincere concern. I'm fine," Harper managed to say, though her voice came out shaky. "Just my pride's hurt." He extended his hand, and when his fingers wrapped around her wet arm to help her up, Harper felt a wave of heat run through her skin despite the cold water. His touch was firm but gentle, protective, and incredibly unsettling. "Are you sure? Did you hit your head?" He examined her carefully, one hand still holding her arm, the other touching her shoulder lightly. The proximity was suffocating. Harper could feel the heat radiating from his body, see every drop of water sliding down his muscular chest, smell the faint scent of masculine soap mixed with chlorine. "No, I was just being an idiot," she admitted, trying to smile despite the embarrassment. "I was so focused on getting the perfect shot that I wasn't paying attention to where I was stepping." "Photographer," he said, raising an eyebrow. Harper noticed how his eyes seemed genuinely interested. There was no judgment there, just curiosity. "Yes. I'm here to photograph the resort before the opening." She looked around, searching for the camera, and her heart sank when she saw it floating a few feet away, probably destroyed. Or rather, I was. He followed her gaze and quickly went to retrieve the equipment, examining it carefully. It might be okay. These professional cameras are pretty tough, aren't they? His thoughtfulness touched her unexpectedly. Strangers didn't usually care this much. I hope so, Harper murmured, visibly shivering now. The combination of cold water, shock, and the wind that was starting to blow was making her body react. You're freezing. It wasn't a question. He was already guiding her out of the pool, a firm hand on her back. Come on, let's get you warmed up. Harper let herself be guided, her sneakers making a squelching sound with each step, her clothes completely soaked and clinging to her body. She crossed her arms over her chest, more out of instinct than modesty, feeling vulnerable and strangely exposed under his attentive gaze. He grabbed 2 soft towels from a nearby stack and wrapped one around her shoulders with an almost tender care. His fingers brushed the skin of her neck as he adjusted the fabric, and Harper swallowed hard, trying to ignore the shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up. He was so close she could see the small golden flecks in his gray eyes, the way his dark lashes were still wet, the small laugh lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled a lot, though now his expression was serious, focused completely on her. "The locker room is right over there. It has hot showers. You should warm up before you catch hypothermia." His voice was low, almost intimate, as if they were sharing a secret. Harper nodded, but her legs seemed reluctant to move. There was something about this moment, the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the world, as if every second mattered, that made her want to stay exactly where she was. "I'll go with you," he said. It didn't sound like an offer, but a decision already made. "Just to make sure you're really okay." And so, soaking wet, shivering, with hearts racing for reasons neither wanted to admit, they walked side by side toward the locker room, not knowing that this accidental encounter at the edge of the abyss would change everything. The locker room was a work of art in itself. Italian marble covered the walls in shades of gray and white, with golden veins that caught the soft light from the recessed spots. The air had a light scent of eucalyptus and lavender coming from diffusers discreetly positioned in the corners. Harper entered hesitantly, her wet footsteps echoing in the spacious and luxurious area, leaving a trail of water on the impeccable floor. He followed, keeping a respectful distance, but his presence filled the space in a way that made Harper's heart race again. She could feel his gaze on her back, not invasive, but attentive, protective. "The showers are over there," he indicated with a gesture, pointing to an area separated by frosted glass dividers. "Clean towels in that cabinet. I'll wait out here to make sure you're okay." Harper turned to thank him, but before she could say anything, all the lights went out at once. The darkness was instant and complete, so dense she couldn't see her own hand in front of her face. A small gasp of surprise escaped her lips. Hey, it's okay." His voice came from the darkness, closer than she expected. "Must be the generator. Sometimes it fails during system tests. Stay where you are. Don't move." Harper froze in place, her heart racing now for a completely different reason. She heard cautious footsteps approaching, then felt his fingers touch her arm lightly, searching for her in the dark. "Found you," he murmured. And there was something in his voice, a palpable relief that made Harper's stomach knot. "I'll try the door." She heard him move, his steps confident even in total darkness. The sound of the handle being turned once, twice, then a frustrated sigh. "It's locked." The automatic security system must have kicked in when the lights went out. There was a pause. "I apologize for this. The resort's technology is still in the adjustment phase. We're trapped." Harper's voice came out higher than she intended. "Temporarily," he replied, coming back to her. Harper felt when he stopped right in front of her. She could feel the heat from his body, hear his controlled breathing. "The security team will notice the failure and come check. It shouldn't take long." But as he said this, Harper started shivering again. The wet clothes clinging to her skin were getting ice cold, and the air conditioning, which apparently kept working even with the lights out, made everything worse. "You're shivering." He touched her arm again, his fingers warm against her cold skin. "So, you need to get out of those wet clothes or you'll get sick." "In the dark?" Harper tried to laugh, but it came out more like a tremor. "I can't even see where I am. I'll help you." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "The hot shower will warm you up. I promise I won't look even if I could see anything in this darkness." There was something in his sincerity that made Harper trust him. Maybe it was the kindness he'd shown since the moment he found her in the pool, or maybe it was the fact that she really was freezing and needed to warm up before the shaking became uncontrollable. "Okay," she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. He guided her slowly through the darkness, one hand holding her elbow, the other extended ahead to avoid obstacles. Harper could feel every point where his skin touched hers, small sparks of warmth that contrasted with the cold of the rest of her body. "Here," he said when they reached the shower stall. "The faucet is—" "Let me find—" His fingers brushed hers as he searched for the controls, and Harper held her breath. "There. I'll turn it on to lukewarm first, so your body doesn't go into shock." The sound of water starting to run filled the silence, and soon steam began to form, bringing a humid and comforting warmth. Harper hesitated only a moment before starting to remove her soaked blouse, her trembling fingers struggling with the clinging fabric. "Need help?" His question was careful, respectful. I think so," she admitted, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment even in the darkness. "I can't. The buttons are stuck." She felt him move closer, the heat from his body enveloping her even before the touch. His fingers found hers, gentle as they worked on the wet buttons. His breathing was faster now, and Harper realized he was as affected by the proximity as she was. "There," he said in a voice rougher than before when the last button came free. Then he stepped back quickly, giving her privacy. I'll be right here. If you need anything, just call." Harper finished undressing with trembling hands and stepped under the stream of warm water. A sigh of relief escaped her lips as the heat began to penetrate her frozen skin. The steam enveloped everything, creating a dense mist that made the darkness almost tangible. "Better?" His voice came from the darkness just a few steps away. "Much better," Harper replied, letting the hot water run through her hair, washing away the chlorine and the embarrassment. "Thank you for all of this." "You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same." "That's not true," she said softly. "Most people would have just helped me out of the pool and gone on with their day. You stayed." There was silence filled only by the sound of falling water. Then he spoke, and there was something vulnerable in his voice. "I couldn't leave without knowing you were okay." Harper's heart leaped in her chest. There was a sincerity in those words that touched her deeply. "You don't even know my name," she said, a smile touching her lips. True, she could hear the smile in his voice too. But sometimes names don't matter as much as moments, right? Harper turned off the shower, feeling infinitely better, warmer, more alive, and strangely connected to this man whose face she'd barely been able to see before everything went dark. "Can you pass me a towel?" she asked. "Of course." She heard him move, then the sound of a cabinet being opened. "Reaching out? Can you reach it?" Harper extended her hand in the darkness, and her fingers found his. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stayed there, fingers intertwined, skin against skin, breath suspended in air, heavy with steam and something else, something electric and inevitable. Then he placed the soft towel in her hands and stepped back. I'll sit here by the door. In case security arrives." Harper wrapped herself in the towel, still trembling, but now she wasn't sure if it was from the cold. Feeling carefully, she found a smooth surface, probably a bench, and sat down. The darkness was disorienting, but also strangely liberating. Unable to see, all her other senses were amplified. She could hear every breath he took, feel every movement of air when he shifted position. "Can I ask you a question?" His voice broke the silence. "Sure. What made you want to be a photographer?" The question surprised her. It was personal. Real. It wasn't casual conversation to fill the silence. He really wanted to know. "I always wanted to capture moments," Harper began, hesitant at first but gaining confidence as she spoke. "Those fleeting seconds that tell entire stories. The way light touches a face. How two people look at each other when they think no one's watching. How a place can make you feel something deep without saying a word. You talk about it with passion," he observed softly. "Like it's more than just a job." "It is." Harper hugged herself, the towel tight around her body. "It's all I have. Actually, my art, my purpose, the only thing that makes sense when everything else feels chaotic. I understand that," he said, and there was a depth in his voice that suggested he really did understand. "Having something that's yours, something no one can take from you. And you?" Harper found herself asking, "What drives you?" There was a long pause. "Building things," he finally answered. "Creating spaces where people can live, really live. Not just exist, but make memories. Like this resort." "Like this resort," he confirmed. And Harper could hear the smile in his voice. They sat in silence for a moment. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that exists between two people who understand each other without needing to fill every second with words. "You know," Harper said softly, "it's strange. I'm sitting in the dark with a complete stranger, and somehow I don't feel strange." "Me neither," he admitted, his voice closer now. He must have moved without her noticing. "It's almost as if this darkness gives us permission to be honest. No masks, no pretenses." Harper felt something tighten in her chest. He was right. In the darkness, without faces to judge, without appearances to maintain, there was only the raw truth of two people sharing an impossible moment. And then, without thinking, she extended her hand in the darkness. She found his. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they'd always been meant to fit together like this. Neither of them said anything. They just remained there, hands joined in the dark, hearts beating in a rhythm neither could control, waiting for the lights that would surely come, and secretly wishing they wouldn't come so soon. The minutes dragged on in the darkness, but neither of them seemed in a hurry for them to end. Harper was still holding his hand, their fingers intertwined in a way that felt both too intimate and perfectly natural. The warmth of his palm against hers created a comforting contrast with the air conditioning that continued blowing through the luxurious locker room. "Are you cold again?" His voice broke the silence, filled with genuine concern. Harper realized she was trembling again, but she wasn't sure if it was from the cold or the intensity of the moment. "A little," she admitted. "Come here." It wasn't a command, but a gentle invitation. She felt him pull her softly, guiding her until their shoulders pressed together. The warmth of his body enveloped her immediately, and Harper found herself relaxing against him, her head naturally finding the space between his shoulder and neck. It was crazy. She barely knew this man, didn't even know his name. But there, in complete darkness, with only the sound of their breathing and the heartbeat she could feel reverberating through the contact of their bodies, nothing else seemed to matter. "Better?" he asked, his voice vibrating against her ear. "Much better," Harper whispered, closing her eyes even though it made no difference in the darkness. She could smell him now, a mixture of chlorine, masculine soap, and something deeper, more him. It was intoxicating. "Can I ask you another question?" he asked after a moment. "Go ahead." "Are you afraid of the dark?" Harper considered the question. "Usually, yes, a little. But now—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Now I'm not, because you're here." She felt his chest rise and fall with a deep breath. "I feel the same way. Safe. And it's strange, because usually I'm the one who needs to make everyone else feel safe." There was something vulnerable in that confession that made Harper lift her head even though she couldn't see him. "What do you mean?" He was silent for a moment, and Harper felt the tension in his muscles, as if he were debating internally how much to reveal. "My life is complicated. There are always expectations, always eyes watching, always decisions that affect hundreds of people. It's exhausting pretending I have all the answers all the time." "But you don't have to have all the answers," Harper said softly, her free hand finding his arm in the dark, touching gently. "Nobody does. Try telling that to the people who depend on me." There was a sadness in his voice that broke Harper's heart. "Sometimes I just want to be invisible, just another person in a crowd, free from all the weight." Harper understood that feeling more than he could imagine. "I used to think I wanted to be seen, recognized for my work. But the closer I get to that, the more I realize that maybe the magical part is precisely this, being able to observe without being observed, capturing life without being part of the show." "You're wiser than you seem," he said, and Harper could hear the smile in his voice. "How do you know?" "You can't even see me," she teased gently. "I don't need to see to know." His voice became lower, more intimate. "I hear it in the way you speak. Feel it in your presence. You have that rare ability to make someone feel seen, really seen. Not just looked at, but understood." Harper's heart raced. No one had ever said anything like that to her. The words touched something deep inside her chest, an old wound she didn't even know needed healing. "You don't know me," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her words. "Maybe not the facts of your life," he agreed, his thumb now tracing soft circles on the back of her hand. The simple gesture sent shivers down Harper's spine. "But I know this essence, this honesty you're giving me right now, without filters, without defenses. And it's beautiful, Harper." It was the first time he'd said her name since she'd mentioned it in conversation, and the way it came from his lips made something tighten in her chest, intimate, reverent, as if he were tasting the word and discovering he liked the flavor. "And you?" Harper heard herself asking, turning more toward him. Her face was now inches from his in the darkness. She could feel the warmth of his breath against her skin. "Who are you when no one's watching?" The pause that followed was loaded with meaning. Harper could feel his internal struggle, the debate between revealing or protecting. "Someone tired of being alone," he finally admitted, his voice low. "Surrounded by people all the time, but completely alone where it really matters." Harper felt tears sting her eyes. She knew that feeling, knew it intimately. "I understand," she said, squeezing his hand. "I feel that way too, like I'm always on the outside looking in, capturing moments of connection but never really being part of them." "Why do you think that is?" he asked, turning as well. Harper could feel that now they were completely facing each other, knees touching, hands still intertwined between their bodies. "Fear, I think." Honesty came more easily in the darkness. "Fear that if I really let someone in, if I completely let my guard down, they'll realize I'm not as interesting as I seem. That I'm just an ordinary girl with a camera trying to make sense of a world that feels too big. Harper," the way he said her name was almost a caress, "there's nothing ordinary about you. I can feel it. Your passion, your vulnerability, your strength, all of that is extraordinary." "How can you be so sure?" Her voice came out shaky. "Because in 30 minutes in the dark with you, I felt more connected, more seen, more myself, than in years of superficial conversations under full light." He let out a low laugh, almost humbled. "It's ironic, isn't it? That darkness is what finally lets me see clearly." Harper felt her eyes burning again. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "It's like this darkness gives us permission to be who we really are, without the masks we wear every day." "Exactly." His free hand found her face in the darkness, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. The touch was so gentle, so reverent, that Harper held her breath. "And who you really are, Harper Lane, is someone I'd very much like to keep getting to know." Her heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it even without being able to see her, especially because he couldn't see her. His voice was a whisper now, his face so close that Harper could feel the heat. Because it means I'm getting to know you from the inside out, the part that really matters. Harper swallowed hard, her entire body vibrating with his proximity. And when the lights come back on, when you can really see me, what if I'm disappointing? Impossible. The conviction in his voice left no room for doubt. But if you're worried, let me tell you a secret. He leaned even closer, his lips brushing against her ear as he whispered, I already saw you before the lights went out. And it was the first thing I thought when I helped you out of the pool. She's beautiful, but it wasn't just physical beauty. It was the way your eyes lit up when you talked about finding the perfect angle. The determination mixed with passion. That's what really captured me. Harper couldn't breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like this, as if each word were chosen carefully, as if she mattered in a deep and meaningful way. You have a talent for this, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, for making someone feel special. It's not talent when it's true. His hand was still on her face, his thumb now gently caressing her cheek. And it's not just someone. It's you. The air between them was charged, dense with a tension that wasn't uncomfortable, but rather full of unspoken promises. Harper leaned instinctively toward his touch, her body responding in ways her rational mind couldn't control. When the lights come back on, she whispered, all of this will seem like a dream, a moment outside reality. Then let me give you something real. He moved slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. But Harper didn't want to pull back. She wanted to dive deeper into this impossible moment. His forehead touched hers first, then his nose brushed softly against hers, and then so gently that Harper almost doubted it was happening, his lips found hers. It was a soft kiss, questioning, respectful, a request more than a demand. And when Harper responded, leaning closer, her fingers finding his wet hair, the kiss deepened, gaining urgency and heat. It wasn't just physical. It was a connection of something deeper. Two lonely souls finding solace in each other. Two people tired of pretending, finally allowing themselves to feel. When they finally separated, both were breathless, foreheads still touching, hands still intertwined, as if letting go were impossible. Real enough? He whispered, and Harper could hear the smile in his voice. Very real, she admitted, a smile of her own touching her lips. And there, in complete darkness, they remained two strangers who somehow were no longer strangers, waiting for the lights that would surely come, but in no hurry for them to arrive. The lights came back on suddenly, exploding in the space with an intensity that made Harper and him recoil instinctively, shielding their eyes with their hands. The brightness was almost painful after so long in complete darkness, and for a moment neither could see clearly. Harper blinked repeatedly, letting her eyes adjust slowly. Her breathing was rapid apart from the sudden shock. Apart from the anxiety of finally seeing the face of the man who had kissed her in the darkness, the man with whom she'd shared confessions she barely shared with people she'd known for years. When her vision finally adjusted, she slowly raised her eyes, and the world stopped. He was even more handsome under the light than her imagination had created in the dark. Dark brown hair tousled, still wet from the pool. Intense gray-blue eyes that now watched her with a mixture of vulnerability and admiration. A strong jaw covered by well-groomed stubble that outlined a face both masculine and soft. And those lips, the same ones that had touched hers moments ago, now curved in a hesitant half-smile. But there was something familiar about that face, something that made a distant alarm sound in Harper's mind. "Hi," he said softly, his voice a bit hesitant. He was still sitting too close to her, their knees touching, one of his hands still holding hers as if he couldn't let go. "Hi," Harper whispered back, trying to ignore the blush she knew was taking over her cheeks. Under the light, the intimacy they'd shared in the darkness seemed simultaneously more real and more exposed. He watched her as if memorizing every detail, the way her dark hair fell damp over her shoulders, the freckles scattered across her nose, the way her brown eyes sparkled under the artificial light. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered," he said without a trace of embarrassment. Harper felt her heart race. But before she could respond, the locker room door burst open with a bang. 2 uniformed security guards entered quickly, walkie-talkies in hand. "Mr. Donovan, we apologize for the system failure. Are you all right, sir?" The tone of urgent concern in the guard's voice was unmistakable. "Mr. Donovan," the name hit Harper like a punch to the stomach. She slowly turned to look at the man beside her again, really seeing him for the first time. Not as the kind stranger who had rescued her, not as the vulnerable man who had shared his fears in the darkness, but as Matthew Donovan, Matt Donovan, the billionaire CEO, the owner of the Azure Bay Resort, the man whose face she'd briefly seen in promotional materials when she'd accepted the photography job, her client. The floor seemed to disappear beneath Harper's feet. Her face paled, and she dropped his hand as if she'd been burned. Standing up quickly, the towel almost slipped, and she clutched it tightly, crossing her arms over her chest, suddenly painfully aware that she was wearing only that She couldn't finish the sentence. Her voice failed. Matt Donovan stood up too, extending his hand as if he wanted to reach her, but stopped mid-motion when he saw the expression on her face. "Harper, Are you all right, Mr. Donovan?" the guard repeated, clearly confused by the palpable tension in the air. "I'm fine, James. Thanks for checking." Matt spoke without taking his eyes off Harper, his voice assuming a more formal, controlled tone, the tone of a CEO. "Can you give us a moment?" The guards exchanged glances but nodded and left, closing the door behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. "Why didn't you tell me?" Harper finally managed to say, her voice coming out higher than intended. "You knew who I was. You knew I was here to photograph your resort. And you didn't say anything." "I didn't." Matt ran his hand through his hair, frustration evident in his movements. "When I helped you in the pool, I wasn't thinking about who you were professionally. I was just helping someone. And then we got trapped in the dark. And it was so real, so honest. I didn't want to ruin that with titles and positions." "Ruin?" Harper let out a humorless laugh. "You don't think hiding who you were, who you are, already ruined everything?" "I wasn't hiding," he protested, taking a step toward her. "I just didn't mention it because for the first time in a long time, someone was seeing me as just a man, not as the billionaire CEO, not as the Donovan name, just me." Harper shook her head, tears of frustration and confusion burning her eyes. "But you're not just a man. You're my client. You're my boss, technically. And she gestured vaguely between them, unable to articulate the weight of what had happened in the darkness. "What happened there was real, Harper." His voice was low, urgent. "Everything I said, everything I felt, it was real. My name doesn't change that." "But it changes everything," Harper insisted, hugging herself. "It changes the power balance. It changes how people will interpret this. It changes." "Does it change what you feel?" he interrupted, those intense eyes fixed on her. "Because it doesn't change what I feel." Harper opened her mouth to respond but didn't know what to say. Because the terrible truth was that it didn't change what she felt. She could still feel the warmth of his lips on hers. Could still remember the feeling of safety when he'd wrapped her in his arms. Could still hear the vulnerable words he'd shared only with her. I need to go," she finally said, looking around desperately. "My clothes are wet," Matt said softly. "Let me have something dry brought for you." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I don't need you to fix this. I just need space." The pain that crossed his face was like a stab to Harper's heart. But she couldn't deal with this now, not when her entire world had turned upside down in a matter of seconds. Matt nodded slowly, accepting her rejection even though every line of his body screamed protest. "Okay, I understand. But..." Harper, he waited until she looked him in the eyes. This isn't over. Not for me. Harper didn't respond. She just grabbed her wet clothes and ran to a changing stall, closing the door and leaning against it, finally allowing the tears to fall. Outside, Matt stood for a long moment, staring at the closed door, his hands still burning with the memory of her touch, his heart heavy with the certainty that he had just lost something precious, before even having the chance to really find it. 3 days later, the official opening of the Azure Bay Resort was in full swing. The event hall was packed with investors, influencers, journalists, and personalities from the California elite. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over elegantly decorated tables, and waiters circulated with trays of champagne and sophisticated canapes. Harper was strategically positioned near the stage, her camera raised, capturing every important moment of the event. She'd spent the last 3 days avoiding any contact with Matt, communicating only through short, professional emails with his team about photo angles and schedules. Each click of the shutter was mechanical, professional, distant, exactly as it needed to be. But then Matt stepped onto the stage for his opening speech, and something inside her tightened painfully. He was impeccable in a charcoal gray suit that enhanced his eyes, his hair perfectly styled, the confident posture of someone born to lead. This was Matthew Donovan, the billionaire, the visionary, not the vulnerable man who had held her hand in the darkness. "Good evening, everyone." His voice resonated through the sound system, rich and authoritative. "It's an honor to share with you the realization of a dream years in development. The Azure Bay Resort isn't just a luxury hotel. It's a sanctuary, a place where moments become memories." Harper focused the lens on him, capturing the passion in his eyes as he spoke about the project. Even through the camera, she could feel his intensity. "But a resort is just marble and glass without the people who bring it to life," Matt continued. And then his eyes found Harper's in the crowd for a second that felt like an eternity. They just looked at each other. "And speaking of bringing life, I'd like to recognize the talented photographer responsible for capturing the soul of this place before we even opened our doors." Harper's heart stopped. "Harper Lane," he said her name like a prayer, and suddenly all the cameras turned to her. "The artist whose work you'll see decorating every hallway, every suite, every common space in this resort. Please come to the stage." Harper froze, panic rising in her throat. She didn't expect this, didn't want this, didn't want to be in the spotlight, especially not summoned by him. But everyone was looking now, applauding, waiting. She had no choice. On trembling legs, Harper walked toward the stage, each step seeming to take an eternity. When she finally climbed the steps, Matt extended his hand to help her. And when his fingers touched hers, that same electricity, that same impossible connection, Harper knew it didn't matter how much time passed, it didn't matter how many complications existed. What had begun in the darkness hadn't ended with the light. And from the gleam in his eyes as he gently pulled her close to the microphone, Matt knew it too. Harper stood frozen on the stage, the hot spotlights on her face, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Matt was so close she could feel the heat emanating from him, could smell the subtle fragrance of his cologne, woody and sophisticated, completely different from the smell of chlorine and soap she'd memorized in the darkness. "Miss Lane's photographs capture not just the architectural beauty of Azure Bay," Matt continued, his voice reverberating through the hall, "but the emotion this place was designed to evoke. Each image tells a story. And that's exactly what we want our guests to feel, that they're part of something memorable." Applause erupted again, and Harper forced a professional smile, waving briefly before turning to descend from the stage. But Matt's hand found the small of her back gently, a touch so light that no one else would notice, but which sent waves of heat through her spine. "Stay just one more moment," he murmured near her ear, his voice too low for the microphone to catch. "Please." It wasn't a command, it was a request. And something in the vulnerability of that single word made Harper stay, even though every instinct screamed for her to run. Matt turned to the crowd again, a charismatic smile on his face. Enjoy the evening. Explore every corner of this resort and create your own memories. Thank you for being here. With the speech ended, the ambient music returned, and the crowd went back to animated conversations. Matt guided Harper off the stage, his hand still on the small of her back until they reached a more secluded corner of the hall. "You didn't warn me you were going to do that," Harper said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. "If I had warned you, you would have refused," Matt replied. Those gray-blue eyes studied her with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "And you deserve to be recognized. Your work is exceptional, Harper." "This isn't about the work," she said quietly, crossing her arms over the navy blue dress she'd carefully chosen for the event, elegant but professional, nothing that could be interpreted as an attempt to impress. "You're mixing things up." "I'm not mixing anything up." Matt took a step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear amid the party's buzz. "Your work is brilliant. That's a fact. And what happened between us? That's also a fact. Two separate facts that don't cancel each other out." Matt Harper began, but the way his name came from her lips soft, almost intimate, made his eyes light up. "You said my name," he observed, a small smile touching his lips. "It's the first time since that night." Harper realized he was right. She'd carefully avoided using his name in all her emails, referring to him only as Mr. Donovan when absolutely necessary. "We need to talk," Matt said before she could respond. "Really talk. Not here, not surrounded by all these people. In private." "I don't think that's a good idea," Harper protested, though her conviction was wavering under his intense gaze. "Please." There was that word again, carrying a weight that went far beyond simple courtesy. "Give me a chance to explain, to show you this isn't what you're thinking." Harper bit her lower lip, debating internally. Every rational fiber of her being said to refuse, to maintain the professional barriers she'd tried so desperately to rebuild over the last 3 days. But there was another part, a part she tried to ignore, that still felt the pressure of his lips, that still heard the confessions whispered in the darkness, that still longed to understand what it all meant. One conversation, she finally gave in. That's all. The relief that crossed his face was so genuine, so palpable that something tightened in Harper's chest. "Thank you. There's a private office on the top floor. 10 minutes enough time for you to circulate. Take a few more photos, not raise suspicions." The way he thought about it, protecting her reputation, considering how it would be perceived, touched Harper more than she'd like to admit. She nodded briefly before walking away, losing herself in the crowd. 10 minutes later, Harper stood before a mahogany door on the top floor, her heart beating so hard she was sure it could be heard through the silent corridor. She raised her hand to knock, but the door opened before her fingers touched the wood. Matt was there, his tie slightly loosened, the first 2 buttons of his shirt open, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked tired in a way she hadn't noticed on stage, as if the public mask had been removed, revealing the real man underneath. "Come in," he said softly, stepping back to let her pass. The office was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the ocean under moonlight, modern but comfortable furniture, a huge glass desk dominating one side of the room. But Harper barely registered the details. She was hyper-aware of Matt's every movement as he closed the door behind her, of the sound of his breathing, of the way the moonlight illuminated the strong profile of his face. "Want something to drink?" he offered, gesturing to the built-in bar. "No, thanks." Harper stayed near the door, keeping her distance. "You said you wanted to talk?" Matt nodded, setting his own glass aside. "I wasn't trying to deceive you, Harper. When I found you in that pool, I was just being myself, not thinking about consequences or complications, just reacting." "But you knew," Harper insisted. "You knew who I was, knew there was a power dynamic, and you still let that happen." "You're right." The admission surprised her. "I knew, and I should have said something. But Harper," he took a step toward her, his hands in his pockets as if forcing himself not to reach for her. "I've spent the last 5 years building empires, closing deals, making decisions that affect thousands of lives, and in all that time, I've never felt as present, as real as I felt in those minutes in the dark with you." The raw sincerity in his voice made Harper's defenses waver. "That doesn't make it right." "No," he agreed. "But it also doesn't make it less true. What I felt, what I feel, has nothing to do with positions or power. It has to do with the way you talk about your art with passion in your eyes, the way you're vulnerable and strong at the same time, the way for the first time in years someone saw me as just a man, not as a title." Harper closed her eyes, trying to maintain control of the emotions that threatened to overflow. "And what do you want from me, Matt? For me to pretend there aren't complications? To ignore the fact that you're my client? That anything between us would be interpreted as what?" He was closer now. She could feel it. "As if you got this job through something other than your extraordinary talent, because anyone with eyes can see your work speaks for itself. As if I would use you somehow, because I would never do that? Or as if this was some passing whim for me, because I guarantee you, Harper, nothing about what I feel when I'm near you is passing." Harper opened her eyes to find him just a few steps away. The intensity in his gaze was almost physical. "You barely know me. Then let me get to know you." His voice was low, urgent. "Let me take you to dinner, just the two of us. No titles, no business. Just two people trying to understand this connection that neither of us can deny." "A dinner?" Harper repeated, her heart racing. "A dinner," he confirmed. "And if after that you decide there's nothing here beyond a confusing moment in the darkness, I'll respect it. I'll keep everything strictly professional. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "Then it's worth trying." Harper knew she should say no, knew that every step closer to him was a risk to her career, to her heart, to the carefully structured life she'd built. But when she looked into his eyes and saw not just desire but also vulnerability, hope, and something deeper that had no name, the word that came from her mouth was, "Okay." The relief that flooded his face was devastating in its beauty. "Tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night," she agreed, barely believing what she was doing. Matt smiled, not the polite, measured smile of the CEO, but a genuine, almost boyish smile that lit up his entire face. He took another step toward her, raising his hand hesitantly to touch a loose strand of her hair, gently tucking it behind her ear. The touch was light, reverent, but sent shivers down Harper's spine. Their eyes met, and the air between them became charged with that same electricity from the darkness. "Can I make a confession?" Matt whispered, his face now inches from hers. "What?" "I haven't stopped thinking about kissing you since the lights came back on." Harper's heart stopped, then raced at double speed. "Matt." "But I won't," he continued, though everything in his posture, in the intense gaze fixed on her lips, said otherwise. "Not yet. Because when I kiss you again, it'll be without doubts, without regrets, with nothing between us except the conscious choice of two people who know exactly what they're doing." The implicit promise in those words made Harper's body vibrate with anticipation. She nodded, not trusting her own voice. Matt stepped back slowly, putting physical space between them before temptation became irresistible. "Tomorrow at 7. I'll pick you up. I can drive." "Let me do this," he interrupted gently. "Let me court you the right way, Harper, the way you deserve." And when Harper left that office minutes later, returning to the party downstairs, she knew she'd crossed a line she couldn't undo. But for the first time in a long time, the idea of taking a risk didn't scare her. She was curious to see where this would lead. Harper changed clothes for the 5th time, looking critically at her reflection in the mirror of the hotel room the resort team had made available to her during the project. The black dress seemed too formal, the skirt and blouse too casual. Finally, She settled on a champagne-colored silk blouse that slid smoothly over her skin and dark jeans that hugged her curves in an elegant but relaxed way, simple, natural, herself. Her fingers trembled slightly as she applied a subtle gloss to her lips. This wasn't just any date. It was that date, the one that would decide if what had happened in the darkness was real or just an illusion created by the vulnerability of the moment. The knock on the door at exactly 7 made her heart jump. Harper took a deep breath, smoothed her blouse one last time, and opened the door. Matt was leaning casually against the door frame, wearing dark jeans and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing tanned, strong forearms, no tie, no corporate armor, just him. And the impact of seeing him like this, relaxed and devastatingly attractive, stole the air from Harper's lungs. His eyes traveled over her body slowly with an appreciation that wasn't lewd but rather reverent. When they finally met hers again, there was a gleam there that made Harper's stomach knot. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his voice low. "Thanks." Harper grabbed her small purse, trying to ignore the blush she knew was rising in her cheeks. "You look good too." He smiled, that genuine smile that completely transformed his face. "Just good?" Harper rolled her eyes but couldn't hold back her own smile. "Don't let it go to your head." "Too late," he teased, offering his arm. "Come on. I have a surprise for you." They didn't go to a fancy restaurant as Harper expected. Instead, Matt led her down a hidden path that descended from the resort toward the beach. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple that seemed painted especially for that moment. On the sand, well above the tide line, there was a small table set up with elegant simplicity. A white tablecloth fluttering in the wind, 2 wooden chairs, candles protected by glass globes, and a picnic basket. Harper stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You did this?" "With some help," Matt admitted, looking almost shy, an expression so incongruous with the confident CEO, she knew that it made Harper's heart melt a little more. "I thought it would be better than a place full of people watching us, more private, more us." "It's perfect," Harper whispered. And it really was. It wasn't ostentation. It wasn't a show of wealth. It was personal, thoughtful, made for her. Matt guided her to the table, pulling out the chair for her with a chivalrous gesture that made Harper smile. When he sat across from her so close that their knees touched under the small table, the world seemed to shrink until there existed only the two of them, the sound of the waves, and the sky on fire. "So," Matt began, opening the basket and removing porcelain plates and carefully wrapped containers, "I discovered through my highly sophisticated investigation, also known as asking your assistant, that you love Italian food." Harper laughed. "You asked Jess for information about me?" "I did," he admitted shamelessly, serving what appeared to be a perfectly assembled caprese salad. "And I also discovered that you're allergic to seafood, that you prefer red wine to white, and that you have a weakness for tiramisu." "Oh my God." Harper shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're kind of a stalker." "I prefer to think of myself as thoroughly attentive," he countered, his eyes sparkling with humor as he filled her glass with a Chianti that probably cost more than her monthly rent. They ate at a relaxed pace, the conversation flowing as naturally as it had in the darkness. But now, with the golden light of sunset illuminating his face, Harper could see every expression, every micro-emotion that crossed those intense eyes when she spoke. "Tell me about your first camera," Matt asked, leaning forward, genuinely interested. Harper felt that familiar warmth she always felt when talking about photography. "It was an old Polaroid I found at a thrift store when I was 12. It cost $5, and I spent all my savings on it. My mom thought it was junk, but to me—" She paused, her eyes distant with the memory. "It was magic, the idea of capturing a moment and having it forever, of making time stand still. And that's when you knew," Matt said softly. "It wasn't a question." "That's when I knew," Harper confirmed, looking at him. that I wanted to spend my life capturing moments, making people see the beauty they usually ignore. Matt reached his hand across the table, his fingers finding hers, intertwining naturally. You have a gift for that, for making people see. Really see. His touch sent waves of heat up her arm. Harper didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she squeezed back, allowing herself to feel that connection. And you? She asked. When did you know you wanted to build things? Matt's expression became more thoughtful. My grandfather was a carpenter. Nothing fancy, he built simple furniture, fixed houses, but he'd take me to his projects when I was a kid. And there was something sacred about the way he worked, as if each piece of wood had a story, a purpose. He taught me that building isn't just about physical structure. It's about creating spaces where people can live their stories. Harper could see the genuine emotion on his face, the passion that mirrored hers when she talked about photography. He would be proud of what you've built. I hope so, Matt said quietly, his thumb now tracing soft circles on the back of her hand. He died before seeing any of my big projects. But I like to think he'd know that every resort, every hotel, every space I create carries a bit of his philosophy. The moment of vulnerability touched something deep in Harper. She turned her hand, fully intertwining her fingers with his, and they stayed like that, hands joined over the table, eyes locked while the sun slowly descended on the horizon. When they finished eating, Matt stood up and offered his hand. Want a walk? Harper accepted, and they descended toward the water, their shoes left behind in the sand. The cold foam of the waves licked their bare feet as they walked side by side, shoulders occasionally touching. Can I ask you a question? Matt broke the comfortable silence. Sure. Why photography? He stopped, turning to face her completely, still holding her hand. I mean, I know you love it, but why? What is it that draws you so much to capturing moments? Harper considered the question carefully. No one had ever asked it that way, not the how, but the why. Because moments are all we really have, she finally said, looking at the ocean. The past is gone. The future hasn't come yet. But this exact second right now, where the sky is this impossible color and the air smells like salt, and I can feel your hand in mine. She looked at him. This moment is real, and it's fleeting, and I want to capture it before it disappears forever. Matt was silent for a long moment, just watching her as if she were the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Then, very slowly, he raised his free hand and touched her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a gentleness that made Harper tremble. And if I kiss you now, he whispered, echoing her words from that night in the darkness, will you run away? Harper's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it over the sound of the waves. No. The smile that curved his lips was both tender and intensely masculine. He took a step closer, eliminating the space between them until Harper had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. His hand slid from her face to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. I've thought about this moment for 3 days, Matt confessed, his voice low. I woke up thinking about it, fell asleep thinking about it. Every meeting I had, every decision I made, a part of me was here with you. Matt, Harper whispered, her hands rising to rest against his chest, feeling his racing heart under her palms. I know, he said, seeming to understand what she couldn't articulate. I feel it too. And then he kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss in the darkness, hesitant, questioning, full of uncertainty. This was a kiss of certainty, of conscious choice of two people who knew exactly what they were doing and chose to do it anyway. His lips were soft but firm, moving against hers with a confidence that made Harper's knees weak. She leaned closer, her fingers clutching his shirt, and when he deepened the kiss, a small sound escaped her throat, half surprise, half pure pleasure. Matt's free arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him until there was no space between their bodies. Harper could feel every hard line of muscle against her softer curves, his warmth seeping through the thin fabric of her blouse, his heart beating as wildly as her own. When they finally separated, both were breathless, foreheads touching, eyes closed, trying to regain some sense of balance in a world that had been completely turned upside down. "Was it worth waiting 3 days?" Harper managed to ask, a smile touching her swollen lips. Matt opened his eyes. And what Harper saw there, raw desire mixed with something deeper, more frightening, made her heart take a dangerous leap. "It would be worth waiting a lifetime," he said, completely serious. And there, with their feet in the sand, the ocean witnessing, and the sky painted in the colors of the day's end, Harper realized she was falling fast, falling deeply, falling in a way she'd never allowed herself before. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of where she would land. The weeks that followed that first date were like living in a dream Harper was afraid to wake from. Matt wasn't just attentive, he was present in a way she'd never experienced. It wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about the small moments he seemed to value as much as she did. He'd show up early in the morning at her room with coffee and croissants, still warm from the bakery 30 minutes away, because she'd casually mentioned they were her favorites. He'd send messages in the middle of the day, just to see how the photo editing was going, genuinely interested in the technical details that made most people's eyes glaze over. He'd appear after sunset with blankets and wine to watch the stars on the resort's rooftop where it all began. They kept the relationship discreet, aware of the curious looks and sharp tongues that would inevitably come. But when they were alone, there were no masks, just the two of them discovering each other. On a Saturday morning 3 weeks after that first kiss on the beach, Harper woke to the soft sound of music coming from the small kitchenette. She opened her eyes slowly, confused for a moment until she remembered she'd given Matt a spare key the night before. Wrapping herself in her robe, she walked barefoot to the kitchen and stopped in the doorway, her heart melting at the scene before her. Matt had his back to her, wearing only jeans, the muscles of his back flexing as he stirred something in a pan. Jazz music played softly from his phone, and he hummed along, completely absorbed in the task. "You cook?" Harper asked, leaning against the doorframe. Matt turned, a smile lighting up his face when he saw her. "Good morning, beautiful." "And yes, I cook. Pancakes are one of my 3 specialties." "Only 3?" she teased, walking toward him. "I'm a man of specific talents," he replied, setting down the spatula to wrap her in his arms. "Pancakes, omelets, and gourmet instant noodles." Harper laughed, her forehead resting against his chest. "Impressive culinary resume. I thought you might be hungry after last night," he murmured against the top of her head, his arms pulling her closer. Heat rose in Harper's cheeks as she remembered the previous night, the dinner that had gone cold because neither of them could stop touching each other, the kisses that had become more urgent, more desperate, until Matt carried her to the bedroom, murmuring promises against her skin. "Last night was," she began, but the words failed. "Perfect." Matt finished, leaning down to kiss her forehead, then her nose, and finally her lips in a soft kiss that still made her toes curl. "You're perfect." "Nobody's perfect," Harper protested against his lips. "You're perfect for me," he corrected, and the absolute sincerity in his voice made something tighten in Harper's chest. They ate pancakes sitting on the small couch, legs intertwined, sharing bites and laughter. Matt told stories of corporate disasters that somehow became hilarious anecdotes, the way he narrated them. Harper showed him old photos of her early work, laughing at awkward angles and amateur compositions. "We were always talented," Matt insisted, running his finger across the tablet screen, studying each image as if it were museum art. "Even here, you can see the eye for detail, the way you capture emotion." "You're being generous," Harper said, but her heart warmed at the compliment. "I'm being honest." He set the tablet aside and pulled her onto his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You see me in a way no one else does. You capture things I don't even know I'm feeling until I see them through your lens." Harper stroked his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "I don't know," he admitted, turning his face to kiss her palm. "With you, the words just come like you unlock a part of me that's been closed for years." They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other, the outside world temporarily forgotten. But then Matt's phone rang, that specific ringtone she'd learned meant urgent work. He groaned, his forehead dropping to her shoulder. "Ignore it." "Matt, it might be important." "You're important," he murmured. But he was already reaching for the phone. The conversation was brief, professional, but Harper saw the transformation from relaxed boyfriend to controlled CEO happening in real time. When he hung up, there was tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "I have to go. Problem with the Seattle project investors." "It's okay," Harper said, even as she felt an emptiness forming watching him pull away. Matt seemed to sense her hesitation because he came back, took her face in his hands, and kissed her deeply. "I'll be back as soon as I can." And Harper, he waited until she looked him in the eyes. "This us, it's the most real thing in my life. Don't doubt that." But doubts were hard to avoid, especially when Harper started noticing the looks. Matt's assistant who always looked a second too long, the investors who greeted her with smiles that didn't reach their eyes, the whispers that stopped abruptly when she entered a room. One afternoon, while reviewing photos on her laptop at the resort cafe, she overheard two women talking at the next table. "I saw her coming out of his private elevator early in the morning," one said, her voice low but still audible. "It's obvious what's going on." "Smart," the other responded with a sour tone. "Sleeping with the boss is a quick way to move up in the world." Harper felt her blood run cold. Her fingers froze over the keyboard, her stomach churning. She knew this would come, she'd prepared herself mentally, but hearing the words out loud, hearing her integrity questioned, her work reduced to a sexual favor, cut deeper than she expected. She closed the laptop harder than necessary and left, ignoring the looks from the two women who finally realized she'd been there. That night, when Matt came to see her, Harper was unusually quiet. They were lying in bed, him tracing lazy patterns on her back while she pretended to read. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Matt finally asked, turning her so she faced him. Harper hesitated, biting her lip. "People are talking." His expression darkened. "What people?" "What are they saying? That I got this job because I'm sleeping with you. That I'm smart for using you to move up in life." The words came out bitter. Matt sat up abruptly, his jaw tight. "That's ridiculous. You were hired weeks before we met. Your portfolio spoke for itself. Anyone with a functioning brain knows that." "But they don't know that," Harper said quietly. Sitting up too, they see an unknown photographer suddenly photographing one of the most exclusive resorts on the West Coast and dating the billionaire CEO. It's easy to draw conclusions. Wrong conclusions. Matt took her hands, squeezing them. "Harper, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "I don't care what ignorant people think. I care about you, about what we have. But I care," Harper admitted, tears burning her eyes. "I've worked hard my whole life to be taken seriously, to be seen for my work, not for who I'm standing next to. And now—" Her voice failed. Matt pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Then we'll prove it to them. We'll show the world that you're brilliant, that your work is exceptional, that you deserve to be here not despite me but completely independent of me." Harper nestled against him, wanting to believe, wanting it to be that simple. "But what if it's not enough?" She whispered against his chest. "What if no matter how good my work is, they'll always just see this?" Matt was silent for a long moment, his hand stroking her hair. "Then we fight together. Because Harper, I'm not giving you up because of gossip. And I hope you won't give up on us because of what strangers think." Harper closed her eyes, breathing in his familiar scent wood and something slightly citrus that was just him. She didn't want to give up. But the fear was there, coiled in her chest like a snake. whispering that maybe this was too big, too complicated, too impossible. "I need to know that I'm more than the CEO's girlfriend," she finally said, lifting her head to face him. "I need to know that my career, my identity won't be swallowed by yours." "You are," Matt said with absolute conviction. "Harper Lane, you're an extraordinary photographer, an artist, a strong, talented woman who would be incredible with or without me in your life. And anyone who doesn't see that is blind." The tears finally overflowed, running down Harper's cheeks. Matt gently wiped them away with his thumbs, kissing each one. "But I understand the fear," he continued softly. "And if you need space, if you need to prove to yourself that you can do this alone, I'll understand. It'll hurt like hell, but I'll understand." "I don't want space," Harper admitted, her fingers clutching his shirt. I'm scared of losing myself, of waking up one day and not recognizing who I've become." "Then promise me something," Matt said, holding her face in his hands. "Promise me you'll tell me if that happens, that you won't let fear consume you in silence, that we'll face this together honestly, even when it's hard." Harper nodded, more tears falling. "I promise." They stayed embraced for hours, whispering promises and fears in the darkness, building a foundation of honesty they both knew would be tested. Because love was easy, love was natural, but building a life together when the world was watching, judging, waiting for them to fail, that would require courage. Neither was sure they possessed. But that night, in each other's arms, with hearts beating in sync, they chose to try. 2 weeks had passed since that difficult conversation, and something had changed between them. It wasn't that Harper's fear had completely disappeared, but now there was a deeper understanding, a conscious choice renewed each day not to let the outside world dictate what happened between them. Matt had been patient, respectful, never pushing for more than Harper was ready to give. But the tension was there, growing, building, becoming almost tangible every time they touched. Every kiss ended with ragged breaths and trembling hands. Every embrace lasted a little longer, their bodies fitting together in ways that promised so much more. That Friday night they'd had dinner at a small Italian restaurant, hidden an hour away from the resort, a place where no one knew them, where they could simply be Harper and Matt. The wine had flowed easily, as had the conversation and laughter. When they returned to his apartment, a modern penthouse, with an ocean view, there was a different energy in the air, something inevitable approaching. Matt locked the door behind them, and when he turned, Harper was there just a few steps away, her dark, intense eyes fixed on him. The soft city lights came through the huge windows, illuminating her in a silver glow that made her seem ethereal. "Want something to drink?" Matt asked, his voice coming out huskier than intended. Harper slowly shook her head. "No. Music? Or we could watch." "Matt." She interrupted him, taking a step toward him, and then another. "Stop offering distractions." He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on hers as she approached. "Okay." When Harper was finally in front of him, so close he could feel the heat from her body, she raised her hand and placed her palm against his chest, feeling his racing heart. "You're nervous," she observed, a small smile touching her lips. "Terrified," he admitted honestly. "Of screwing this up, of not being what you need of." Harper silenced him by placing her fingers over his lips. "You're already everything I need." She replaced her fingers with her mouth, kissing him softly. "You just need to be here, present with me." The kiss started gentle, exploratory, but quickly gained intensity. Matt's hands found Harper's waist, pulling her closer until there was no space between them. She moaned softly against his lips, her fingers rising to tangle in his hair. Matt turned her gently, pressing her against the door he'd just closed. His hands traveled the sides of her body, memorizing every curve through the light summer dress she wore. When his lips left her mouth to trace a trail down her neck, Harper tilted her head back, giving him access, a sigh escaping her lips. "Matt," she whispered, her nails lightly scratching his scalp in a way that sent shivers down his spine. "Tell me," he murmured against her skin, his teeth gently nibbling her earlobe. "Tell me you feel this too." "I feel it," Harper breathed, her hands dropping to grip his shoulders, needing something to hold on to while the world spun. "I feel it too much." Matt lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers, dark with desire but also full of something deeper. "We can stop any time if you're not ready." "I'm ready," Harper interrupted, holding his face in her hands. "I'm scared, yes, but I'm also ready because I trust you. I trust us." Something broke in his expression, the last barrier of restraint crumbling. He kissed her again, this time with an urgency that took Harper's breath away. His hands found the back of her dress, skilled fingers working the zipper while his mouth never left hers. The dress slipped off Harper's shoulders, falling in a pool of fabric at her feet. She stood there in simple but elegant black lace lingerie, and the way Matt looked at her as if she were the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen made all insecurity melt away. "Beautiful," he whispered, reverent. "So beautiful it hurts to look." Harper's hands went to his shirt buttons, trembling slightly. Matt covered her hands with his, helping her, and together they undressed him. When Harper finally placed her palms against his bare chest, feeling the warmth of his skin, the tense muscles under her touch, she let out a small, needy sound that made his jaw tighten. "Bedroom," he managed to say, his voice strained. "I want to do this right." He picked her up in one fluid motion, Harper's legs automatically wrapping around his waist, her arms around his neck. They kissed the whole way down the hallway, Matt occasionally stumbling because he refused to stop kissing her long enough to see where he was going. When they finally reached the bedroom, he laid her on the bed with a gentleness that contrasted with the urgency in his movements. Moonlight streamed through the huge windows, bathing everything in silver and shadows. Matt stood beside the bed for a moment, just looking at her hair spread on the pillow, lips swollen from kisses, chest rising and falling rapidly, eyes shining with desire and trust, and something that looked dangerously like love. "What?" Harper asked, her voice soft. "I just want to remember this moment," he said quietly, climbing onto the bed to position himself over her, supporting his weight on his arms. "You like this, us like this before everything changes." "Will it change?" Harper asked, her hands rising to trace the contours of his face. "It already has," he admitted, lowering himself to kiss her softly. "The moment I met you, it already changed." The kisses became deeper, more desperate. Hands explored heated skin, discovering sensitive spots that made the other moan. When Matt finally removed her lingerie, his hands trembled slightly, not from uncertainty, but from pure, barely contained need. "You're perfect," he murmured against her skin, his lips tracing a trail from her neck to the valley between her breasts. "Absolutely perfect." Harper arched against him, her fingers tangled in his hair, guiding him, encouraging him. When his mouth finally closed around a hardened nipple, she moaned loudly, her back coming off the bed. "Matt, please," she whispered. Not sure what she was asking for, only knowing she needed more. He understood. His hand slid lower, caressing, teasing, preparing. When he finally touched her where she needed it most, Harper saw stars. His fingers were skilled, patient, building a rhythm that took her higher and higher until she was trembling on the edge of something immense. "Let go," Matt whispered against her ear, his thumb pressing exactly the right spot, while his fingers continued their movement. "Let me see you." And Harper did, falling over the edge with a muffled cry against his shoulder, her entire body trembling with the force of the orgasm. When she finally managed to open her eyes again, Matt was looking at her with an expression of admiration and desire so intense it made her heart leap. "Beautiful," he said simply. Harper pulled him into a deep kiss, her hands working on his pants with renewed urgency. She wanted everything, wanted to feel every inch of him, wanted nothing between them but skin and sweat and whispered promises. When he finally undressed completely and positioned himself between her legs, Matt stopped, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" he asked, even though every line of his body screamed need. "Absolutely," Harper replied, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I want you, all of you. Now." Matt moved slowly, carefully giving her time to adjust. Harper held her breath at the sensation of fullness, her eyes never leaving his. There was intimacy in maintaining eye contact, a raw vulnerability that went beyond the physical. "Okay?" he asked, his voice tense with the effort to control himself. "More than okay," Harper sighed, her legs wrapping around his waist, pulling him deeper. "Perfect." They found a rhythm together, slow at first, savoring every sensation, every shared sigh, but gradually urgency built, movements becoming faster, more desperate. Matt kissed her constantly on her lips, her neck, her shoulder, as if he couldn't get enough of her. "Harper," he moaned against her skin, feeling her tighten around him. "You're incredible, so incredible. Don't stop," Harper begged, her nails scratching his back. "Please don't stop." "Never," he promised, one hand sliding between their bodies to touch her again. "Come with me. I want to feel you." The combined touch with the perfect angle of his thrusts took her there again, more intense this time. Harper cried out his name, her entire body convulsing as pleasure flooded her in waves. Matt followed seconds later, burying his face in her neck, his own hoarse moan as he surrendered. They stayed like that for several minutes, heavy breathing, gradually calming, bodies still intertwined. Matt finally moved, withdrawing from her carefully and lying beside her, immediately pulling her into his arms. Harper nestled against his chest, one leg intertwined with his, listening to his heartbeat slowly returning to normal. "That was," she began, but couldn't find words. "I know," Matt said softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. "I feel it too." They were silent for a moment, just enjoying the closeness, the warmth, the feeling of being completely connected. "You're everything I didn't know I needed," Matt finally whispered in the darkness. Harper lifted her head to look at him, seeing the raw truth in his eyes. "And you're everything I was always afraid to want." He smiled, that rare and completely genuine smile that transformed his face. "Fear is good. It means it matters." "It matters," Harper confirmed, lowering herself to kiss him softly. "It matters more than I'm ready to admit." "Then don't admit it yet," Matt said, pulling her closer. "Just stay here with me. Let the rest wait until tomorrow." And Harper did exactly that, falling asleep in his arms while he continued tracing patterns on her skin, whispering promises she half heard, half dreamed, all of them sounding suspiciously like forever. The following months were an intoxicating mix of intense happiness and growing anxiety. Harper and Matt became inseparable. Discreet dinners turned into entire weekends together. Constant messages during the day. Late-night calls when distance separated them for business trips. The relationship flourished, but not without costs. The media finally found out. It was inevitable, really. Someone photographed them leaving a restaurant in San Francisco, hands intertwined, Matt kissing her forehead as they waited for the valet. The photo first appeared on a gossip blog, then spread like wildfire. "Billionaire CEO Matthew Donovan finds love with unknown photographer" was the kindest headline. Others were less charitable. "From unknown to billionaire's girlfriend." Harper Lane's rapid climb, and Donovan and his new conquest, love or opportunity. Harper tried to ignore it, but it was impossible when she received pitying looks from some colleagues and poorly disguised envious looks from others. Her work was going well, exceptionally well, actually. She had been hired for 2 more major projects, both completely independent of Matt. But even so, the whispers persisted. Of course, she got the Coastal magazine contract. Everyone knows Matt Donovan has connections there. It didn't matter that Harper had done a blind audition, that her portfolio spoke for itself. that the editor didn't even know about her relationship until after she was hired. The narrative was written, and nothing she did seemed to change it. Matt was furious about the situation. He wanted to make public statements, sue outlets for defamation, use all his influence to silence the critics. But Harper stopped him. "That'll only make it worse," she argued one night after a particularly heated discussion. "It'll look like you're defending me because I'm your girlfriend, not because my work is good." "Your work is excellent," Matt insisted, his hands gripping her shoulders. "And anyone who doesn't see that is either blind or malicious. But they won't see it as long as it's coming from you," Harper said wearily, pulling away. "You don't understand, Matt. For you, your position, your name, your money, they're advantages. For me, the moment I'm associated with you, all of that becomes a disadvantage. Every achievement of mine is diminished because, of course, she's with Matt Donovan." The pain that crossed his face was like a stab to Harper's heart. But she couldn't lie, not about this. "So what do you want to do?" Matt asked quietly. "Do you want us to break up? Pretend we don't exist to each other?" "No," Harper said quickly, the mere idea making her chest tighten painfully. "But I need something of my own, something big, something that proves I deserve to be here on my own merit." That's when the opportunity, or curse, Harper still wasn't sure, appeared. Brooke Sterling. The name reached Harper through an elegant email with an invitation impossible to ignore. Brooke was director of one of New York's most prestigious art galleries, known for launching the careers of emerging photographers, and she was offering Harper a solo exhibition. "Your work caught my attention," the email said. "There's a raw emotion in your photographs that's rare to find. I'd like to discuss the possibility of an exhibition at Sterling Gallery next fall." Harper read the email 3 times, her heart racing. It was everything she'd always wanted: an exhibition in New York, validation from the art world, tangible proof that she was good enough. But then she researched Brooke Sterling and felt her stomach sink. Brooke wasn't just an influential gallery director. She was also Matt's ex-girlfriend. They had dated for 2 years, breaking up only 6 months before Harper met Matt. Photos of them together still circulated on the internet. Brooke, stunning with long legs and perfectly styled blonde hair, always dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than Harper's annual rent. When Harper showed Matt the email, his expression immediately closed. "No," he said flatly. "No?" Harper repeated, confused. "Matt, it's an incredible opportunity." "It's a trap," he interrupted, his jaw tight. "Brooke doesn't do anything without ulterior motives. If she's offering you an exhibition, it's because she wants something. Maybe she really likes my work," Harper argued, feeling defensive. "Maybe," Matt agreed, but he didn't look convinced. "Or maybe she wants you around to manipulate me somehow, or worse, to publicly humiliate you. You can't know that." "I know Brooke," Matt said firmly, "better than I'd like to. And I know how she operates." Harper crossed her arms, frustration bubbling up. "What if you're wrong? What if this is my chance to prove I'm more than the billionaire's girlfriend? Am I going to throw this away because of your ex?" "It's not about her being my ex," Matt insisted. "It's about protecting you." "I don't need to be protected," Harper shot back, her voice rising. "I need a chance, and if that means dealing with your ex-girlfriend, then so be it." The argument escalated quickly, sharp words thrown from both sides. Matt thought Harper was being naive. Harper thought Matt was being controlling and overprotective. They went to bed that night with their backs to each other, the space between them feeling like a chasm. Against Matt's advice, Harper accepted the invitation to meet with Brooke. The meeting was set at an elegant cafe in downtown Los Angeles, neutral enough not to raise too many questions. Brooke arrived 15 minutes late, entering the cafe as if it were a runway. She was even more stunning in person, tall, elegant, with a confidence that came from years of privilege and success. When her eyes found Harper, there was a calculating gleam that immediately activated all internal alarms. "Harper Lane," Brooke said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Finally. "I've heard so much about you." The tone was polite, but there was a sharp edge hidden in the words. Harper shook her hand, forcing a professional smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for your interest in my work." They sat down, and Brooke ordered a green tea before turning all her attention to Harper. "Your work really is remarkable. There's a raw vulnerability in it, as if you're capturing not just moments but emotions. Very intimate." "Thank you," Harper said cautiously, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Although," Brooke continued, stirring her tea with elegant movements, "I have to admit I was surprised to discover who you're dating. Small world, isn't it?" There it was. Harper kept her expression neutral. "Matt and I met professionally. My work at the Azure Bay Resort has nothing to do with our personal relationship." "Of course not," Brooke said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Matt's always been good at separating business from pleasure. Usually." Harper felt the provocation but refused to take the bait. "About the exhibition." "Yes." "The exhibition." Brooke leaned forward, her expensive perfume invading the space between them. "Here's my proposal. A solo exhibition at Sterling Gallery, 3 months of display starting in October, guaranteed media coverage, presence of important collectors. It's the chance to launch your career at the level where it should be." It sounded too good to be true, and it probably was. "And in return?" Harper asked, keeping her voice steady. Brooke smiled, and there was something predatory in that smile. "Just your art, dear. And maybe a bit of your time, social events, interviews. You know how it works. The artist is part of the product. And Matt?" Harper couldn't help but ask. "Is he part of this equation?" "Matt?" Brooke feigned surprise. "Why would Matt be involved?" "This is about you and your talent." She paused, her eyes gleaming with barely disguised malice. "Although I imagine he's not very happy about our meeting." "Matt supports me," Harper said firmly, even knowing it was a half-truth at best. "How nice of him," Brooke said, her tone saccharine. "He's always been generous with his girlfriends for a while, at least." The implication was clear and cut deep. Harper felt her blood boil but maintained her composure. "I'll think about your offer and give you an answer by the end of the week." "Don't take too long," Brooke warned, grabbing her designer bag. "Opportunities like this don't wait." And Harper, she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, some advice from woman to woman. "Enjoy it while it lasts. Matt gets bored easily, and when he gets bored, he moves on. He always has." With that, she stood up and left, leaving Harper sitting alone with a tight knot in her stomach and more doubts than answers. That night, Harper confronted Matt at his apartment. He was working from home, papers spread across the dining table, laptop open, his face illuminated by the screen. "We need to talk," she said, without preamble. Matt looked up, and immediately his expression became cautious. "You met with her?" "I did," Harper confirmed, crossing her arms. "And you were right, she has ulterior motives. But Matt, even knowing that, I still want to accept." "Harper, let me finish," she interrupted. "I need this exhibition not out of vanity, not out of ego, but because I need to prove to myself, to the world, that I'm more than just the CEO's girlfriend, that my work means something independent of you." Matt was silent for a long moment, studying her. "What if Brooke uses this to hurt us?" "To hurt you?" "Then I'll deal with it," Harper said, her voice firm even though inside she was trembling. "But I can't live my life afraid of what she or anyone else might do. That's not living, that's hiding." "I don't want to see you hurt," Matt said quietly, standing up and walking to her. "I know," Harper touched his face, her heart tightening at the love and worry she saw there. "But I need you to trust me to believe I'm strong enough to face this." Matt closed his eyes, his jaw tight. When he opened them again, there was resignation there mixed with fear. "I trust you. I always have. I just don't trust her." "Then help me," Harper asked. "Help me navigate this, but don't ask me to refuse. Please." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. "Okay, but with one condition." "What?" "Total creative control. Nothing you exhibit goes through Brooke without your final approval. And if at any point you feel she's manipulating you or trying to use you, you walk away, no looking back." Harper nodded against his chest. "Deal." But as they stood there, embraced in silence, they both knew they'd just opened a door to something dangerous, and neither was sure they'd come out the other side intact. The following months tested Harper and Matt in ways neither could have predicted. Preparation for the exhibition consumed Harper's life. Selecting photographs, working with the curatorial team, dealing with Brooke's increasingly demanding requests. And as Matt had predicted, Brooke didn't make things easy. She questioned every choice Harper made, suggested improvements that completely distorted the artistic vision, and made subtly poisonous comments about Matt whenever she had the chance. But Harper held her ground. She'd made a promise to herself. This exhibition would be hers on her terms, or it would be nothing. The battle culminated 2 weeks before the opening when Brooke tried to include photographs from the Azure Bay Resort in the exhibition without Harper's permission. "They're your best pieces," Brooke argued, her tone condescending. "And frankly, they're the only ones with real commercial appeal. The rest is too artsy." "No," Harper said firmly for the 5th time in that meeting. "Those photographs aren't part of the narrative I'm telling. And besides, it would be an obvious exploitation of my relationship with Matt, exactly what I was trying to avoid." "Darling," Brooke sighed dramatically, "you're being naive. In this world, connections matter. Why not use them to your advantage?" "Because I don't need them," Harper shot back, gathering her things. "And if you can't respect my artistic vision, then maybe we're in the wrong gallery." It was a risky bluff. Harper knew that canceling now would be disastrous for her career, but she also knew that giving in would mean losing the one thing she was fighting for: her integrity. Brooke studied her for a long moment, and something changed in her expression. Respect, perhaps, or simply the recognition that she'd met a worthy adversary. "Fine," she finally said. "Your way." "But Harper," her smile was sharp, "I hope you know what you're doing." The opening night of the exhibition was a mix of terror and exhilaration. Harper looked beautiful in a simple but elegant black dress, not trying to impress, just being herself. Matt was at her side, discreet but present, a steady hand on the small of her back as they navigated the crowd of critics, collectors, and onlookers. The photographs were arranged in a carefully constructed narrative. Stories of human connection, stolen moments, beauty found in unexpected places. There were no photos from Azure Bay, no references to Matt. It was purely Harper, her vision, her voice. And people loved it. "Extraordinary," a renowned critic murmured as he studied a series of photos of fishermen at dawn. "There's an honesty here that's refreshing." "Who's the artist?" a collector asked, already calculating how much she'd be willing to pay. Harper watched from afar, barely believing it was happening. Years of work, of doubt, of struggle, all culminating in this moment. Matt found her near one of his favorite photographs, an image of intertwined hands against the sunset, light filtering through the fingers. "That's you and me," he whispered in her ear, recognizing the moment she'd captured months ago on one of their beach walks. "No one else knows," Harper replied, smiling. "It's our secret." "I love that," Matt said, his eyes shining. "And I love you so much." Harper turned to him, her heart overflowing. "I love you too." It was the first time they'd said the words out loud, and the weight of them hung in the air between them, precious, frightening, perfect. 2 months later, with the exhibition a resounding success and multiple offers coming in, Harper finally felt validated. She'd proven to herself and to the world that she was an artist in her own right. That's when Matt took her back to the beach where they'd had their first date. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in the same impossible colors, but this time there was a difference. Matt knelt in the sand. "Harper Lane," he began, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. When I met you, I was convinced I knew what my life would be. Controlled, predictable, alone, even surrounded by people. And then you literally fell into my life." He smiled through the tears glistening in his eyes. "Literally. And everything changed." Harper was crying, her hands covering her mouth, her heart beating so hard it felt like it would explode. "You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that letting someone in doesn't mean losing yourself, that love isn't about control but about choice. And I choose you every day, every night, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a simple but stunning ring. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," Harper said immediately, falling to her knees in the sand beside him. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands and then kissed her deeply, desperately, completely. Around them the world continued, but for them in that moment, only the two of them existed. They got married 3 months later in a simple beach ceremony, nothing elaborate, nothing ostentatious, just close family, intimate friends, and the vows that really mattered. Harper was barefoot, a white dress fluttering in the wind, wild flowers in her hair. Matt was in white pants and a linen shirt, also barefoot, his eyes red with emotion as he watched her walk toward him. "I promise to be your home," Harper said when it came time for vows, her voice trembling but firm. "Even when the world is chaos, I promise to see you, really see you, even when you're wearing all your masks. I promise to choose you, not just on the easy days but especially on the hard ones. And I promise to never stop capturing moments with you because every second by your side deserves to be remembered forever." Matt wiped tears from his face, unashamed to cry. "And I promise to never stop choosing you every day, every night, even when it's hard. I promise to respect your art, your voice, your independence. I promise to be your partner, not your protector, your equal, not your savior. And I promise that no matter how big or complicated our life becomes, there will always be room for simple moments, just us, in darkness or light, being completely ourselves." When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," the kiss was met with applause and tears from everyone present. And when they separated, foreheads touching, smiling through tears, Harper whispered, "It was worth the wait." "Every second," Matt agreed. 6 months after the wedding, Harper discovered she was pregnant. She planned the reveal, carefully waited until they were alone at home, a quiet Friday night. When Matt entered the bedroom after a long day, he found Harper sitting on the bed, a small package beside her. "What's this?" he asked, curious, sitting down next to her. "Open it," Harper said, biting her lip nervously. Matt unwrapped the gift slowly, revealing a tiny pair of blue baby shoes and a pregnancy test with 2 clear pink lines. For a moment he just stared, processing, and then his eyes widened, meeting hers. We're?" Harper nodded, tears already streaming. "We're having a baby." Matt let out a sound between a laugh and a sob, pulling her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby. Our baby. Our baby," Harper confirmed, laughing through tears. Matt pulled back just enough to place his hands over her still flat stomach, his eyes full of wonder. "There's a part of us growing in there. Our future, our miracle. Are you happy?" Harper asked, though she could see the answer clearly on his face. "Happy doesn't even come close," he said, kissing her softly. "I'm complete for the first time in my life. I'm completely, perfectly complete." That night they stayed awake late, lying together in bed, Matt's hands never leaving her belly. They talked about names, about the future, about the kind of parents they wanted to be. They laughed at their own insecurities. They cried with pure joy. "You know what's funny?" Harper said eventually, her fingers intertwined with his over her belly. "If I hadn't fallen in that pool, I would have found another way," Matt interrupted, kissing the side of her head. "The universe would have figured it out. Because you and me, we were always inevitable." "Inevitable," Harper repeated, liking the word. "Like the sunrise. like waves touching the sand. Exactly, Matt agreed, pulling her closer. And there, in the soft darkness of their bedroom, with hearts beating in sync and a new life growing between them, Harper and Matt finally understood what they'd found that night of darkness months ago. It wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just love. It was home. It was destiny. It was the feeling of finally, after searching a lifetime, finding the place where they belonged. And that place was in each other's arms. In the end, Harper and Matt learned that true love isn't about perfection. It's about choice, choosing to stay when it would be easier to leave, choosing to trust when fear whispers doubts, choosing to build together even when the world tries to tear them apart. They discovered that sometimes the best moments are born in darkness, where there are no masks to hide who we really are, and that the greatest risk isn't opening your heart, it's never trying. Harper proved she was more than a title, more than a relationship. She was an artist, a strong woman, a complete soul. And Matt learned that vulnerability isn't weakness but rather the greatest courage. Together, with a baby on the way and a future full of promise, they built something no outside opinion could destroy, a home made of stolen moments, whispered kisses, and the absolute certainty that no matter what came, they'd be side by side. Because sometimes, all someone needs is to be seen, really seen. And maybe, deep down, this story also speaks to us, to all the times we've been afraid to love, to risk, to believe we deserve to be chosen. What if you also believe it's